It was one of those days when everything seemed to come crashing down. The morning started like any other, with the familiar routine of breakfast, the hum of the coffee machine, and the constant rush to get ready for work. But I could feel the tension building in the air, a heaviness that had been there for weeks, maybe even months. Ryan and I had been drifting, silently but steadily, further apart. It wasn't anything we could put a finger on, not at first. Small things, misunderstandings, the lack of shared laughter, the empty silences between us. But it had become impossible to ignore. We sat down for dinner that night, something we used to enjoy together. But tonight, I could barely make eye contact with him. He was talking, but his words seemed distant, as if he wasn't even speaking to me. I felt like I was watching him through a thick glass wall, unable to reach him, unable to get through. The frustration bubbled up, like a pot about to overflow. "Ryan, do you even hear me anymore?" I asked, my voice sharp, though I didn't intend it to be. "We don't talk anymore. You don't listen, and I can't keep doing this. It feels like I'm just existing here, not living. You're holding me back." He froze, his fork suspended midair. His eyes met mine for a brief second, and then quickly looked away. The silence that followed was so heavy, I could feel my chest tightening. He was a man who used silence to shield himself, and in that moment, it felt like he was shutting me out completely. "Don't you think you're being a little dramatic?" he muttered, almost dismissively, his tone laced with something I couldn't quite place. Resentment, maybe, or fear. I felt my anger rise, but there was something else there too, something deeper, something more painful. I wasn't angry at him, I was angry at myself. I was angry that I had let it get this far. Angry that I had let my dreams slip away, buried under the weight of a life I hadn't chosen but had settled into. I had put everything on hold for this marriage, for him, for us, and somewhere along the way, I had lost who I was. "I'm not being dramatic, Ryan," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound firm. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. I can't keep living this way. You don't support me. You don't understand me. You're holding me back from becoming who I really am, from doing what I want with my life. You've been holding me back for years, and I can't do it anymore." The words were out before I even realized what I had said. There it was, the truth that had been building inside me for so long, finally spilling out. I didn't just feel neglected, ignored, or taken for granted. I felt trapped. Trapped in a life I didn't recognize anymore, a life that was slowly suffocating me. He looked at me now, not with anger, but with something else, hurt. His face was pale, his lips pressed together tightly, as though he were trying to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. For a moment, I thought he might say something, anything to defend himself, to justify his actions or inactions. But instead, he stood up from the table and walked out of the room without another word. The door slammed behind him, and the house fell silent. The silence was deafening, and I felt like I was suffocating in it. I had done it. I had finally pushed him away, said the one thing I knew would break him. But in that moment, I didn't feel relieved. I felt nothing but a deep, aching emptiness. I sat there for a long time, long after the dinner had gone cold, staring at the empty chair across from me. My heart ached, not just for him, but for the woman I used to be, the woman who had loved him so much, the woman who had believed in the dream of forever. And now, with one cruel, impulsive statement, I had shattered that dream. I didn't know if I could ever put the pieces back together, but I knew one thing for sure, he wasn't coming back. Not after that. The days that followed were a blur, an endless stretch of empty hours. Ryan didn't come back. Not that night. Not the next day. And as time dragged on, I began to wonder if he ever would. I spent the first couple of days in a fog, my mind a constant whirl of guilt and confusion. I didn't know if I had made the right choice, but I knew I couldn't take back what I had said. The words were out, and I had to live with them. I stayed home from work the first few days, thinking maybe he'd come to his senses, that he'd walk through the door, angry but willing to talk. But he didn't. The house was eerily quiet, the silence more oppressive than I had ever imagined it would be. Even the ticking of the clock on the wall felt like a reminder of how much time had passed since our last conversation. I called him twice the first day. The calls went straight to voicemail. I left messages, apologizing, but never really meaning it. I told myself I wasn't sorry for what I had said, only for the way I had said it. I hadn't meant to hurt him, but I had. And now, it felt like there was no way to undo the damage. I reached out to friends, trying to get some perspective. Some said I had every right to stand up for myself, that I needed to put my own happiness first. Others, though, told me I had gone too far. They reminded me of all the good things Ryan had done for me, how we had built a life together, and how I was throwing it all away. They told me I should apologize, fix things before it was too late. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I understood what had really happened between us. I spent a lot of time reflecting, staring at the walls, pacing the rooms of our house. I thought about everything, our first meeting, our wedding day, the way he used to look at me like I was everything he ever wanted. I wondered when things started to shift. It wasn't one big thing. It was the little things, the moments that built up over time. The way he stopped listening to me, how he'd started to retreat into himself, how I'd started to feel invisible. But none of that explained why I had said what I did. Why I had blurted out those words that seemed so cold and final, words I never thought I'd say. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me, about feeling lost and suffocated, like I had become someone I didn't recognize. I had become the person who waited for him to change, who sacrificed my own dreams in the hope that one day, he'd see me. But he didn't, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep waiting for something that might never come. By the fourth day, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I was waiting for myself. I was waiting for the part of me that had been hidden for so long, the part of me that had dreams of her own, of a future outside of our marriage, to come back to life. I couldn't keep living for him, and I couldn't keep living in this limbo. But still, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was supposed to fix things, to beg him to come home, or if I was supposed to just move on. I didn't know if he would ever come back. And that uncertainty gnawed at me, a constant ache in my chest. On the sixth day, I found myself sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at the empty space beside me. It felt wrong, unsettling. This was supposed to be his spot. I kept waiting for the sound of the front door opening, his footsteps echoing through the hallway. But they never came. The silence had become my constant companion. I spent the day trying to make sense of everything. I cleaned, rearranged the furniture, and organized things, anything to keep my mind busy, to stop the whirlwind of emotions that had been spinning inside me since the night I had said those words. I knew I couldn't take them back, but the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Around midday, I decided to write. Writing had always been a way for me to process my thoughts, my feelings. It was something I hadn't done in years. There was always something else to focus on, always another task or responsibility to take care of. But today, I needed to write. I needed to find some clarity. I sat at the kitchen table, picked up a pen, and let my thoughts spill onto the paper. At first, I just wrote whatever came to mind, the words tumbling out in a disorganized mess. But as I kept writing, I started to focus, to shape the mess into something more coherent. I wrote about everything, about the way we had drifted apart, about how I had started to feel invisible, about how I had tried to find a way to fix things, but it had felt like I was the only one trying. I didn't know if Ryan would ever read the letter. I didn't know if he even cared enough to come back and face me. But I had to say it. I had to put it all down, so I could understand it for myself. I told you I felt like you were holding me back, I wrote, and I meant it. But it wasn't just about you. It was about me. I've been stuck in this place, in this life, for so long that I forgot who I was. I forgot what I wanted, what made me happy. I put all of that aside for us, for the life we built. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I became someone I didn't recognize anymore. I paused, reading the words over and over. This was the truth, the raw, unfiltered truth I had been afraid to admit. It wasn't just about him. It was about me finding my own way again, about reclaiming my life. I never wanted to hurt you, I continued, but I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when I feel like I'm drowning. I didn't want to push you away, but I couldn't keep living this lie. I've been holding on to something that wasn't working, and I didn't know how to let go. I'm sorry for the things I said, but I'm not sorry for wanting more. I need to find myself again, Ryan. And I need you to understand that. I paused again, my hand shaking slightly as I finished the letter. I had never been good at expressing my emotions, at opening up about my feelings. But somehow, this letter felt like the first step toward healing, even if it was just for me. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in an envelope. I didn't know if he would ever read it, if he would even care. But it didn't matter. Writing it had helped me, in ways I hadn't expected. It had forced me to confront the truth, to accept that I had made a mistake, but also that I had a right to want more. I was no longer the woman I had been 6 days ago. I wasn't sure who I was yet, but I was starting to find out. The next few days dragged on in a haze, each one blending into the other. I had returned to work, trying to find some sense of normalcy, but it wasn't the same. I felt like I was living in two worlds, one where everything was still falling apart, and one where I was just going through the motions. The space Ryan had left in our home felt bigger than ever, a constant reminder of his absence. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, stopped hoping that one of the missed calls would be from him. I tried to convince myself that it was better this way, that I was better off alone, figuring things out on my own. But there were moments, late at night, when I still found myself wondering if he would come back, if we would find a way to rebuild what had been broken. It was on the 7th day that my phone rang while I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a cup of coffee. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the name on the screen, Ryan. I hesitated for a moment, my breath catching in my throat. Was this really happening? Was he calling to apologize, to fix things? Or was this the final goodbye? My hand shook slightly as I picked up the phone. Hello? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, Ryan's voice came through, quiet and distant. It's me. I swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. I wasn't expecting you to call. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, like he was trying to find the right words, or maybe trying to summon the courage to speak. I've been thinking a lot, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. About what you said. About everything. My heart pounded in my chest, but I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. I don't know if I can fix this, he continued, the words heavy with uncertainty. But I need you to know something. I've been so caught up in my own shit, my own problems, that I didn't see what was happening to you. I didn't see how much you were sacrificing for me, for us. And I'm sorry for that. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I didn't interrupt him. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when he would finally see me, when he would finally understand. I've been selfish, he said, the guilt in his voice almost palpable. I've been so focused on my own stuff that I didn't realize you were losing yourself. I didn't see how much I was holding you back. I've been a terrible husband, and I can't take back all the things I've done wrong. But I want to try. I want to make things right, if you'll let me." The words hit me like a wave, crashing over me all at once. I had prepared myself for this moment, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure what to feel. I wanted to believe him, to think that this could be the start of something better, but I couldn't shake the doubt that lingered in my mind. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "But I don't know if I can forgive myself either." Ryan didn't say anything for a long time. And when he spoke again, his voice was soft, almost like he was afraid to push me too hard. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," he said gently. "I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. If you'll give me the chance." I closed my eyes, my mind swirling with emotions I couldn't quite untangle. It felt like too much. Too soon. I had spent so many days living without him, without his presence, without his love. Could I really let him back in? "I need time," I said, finally finding my voice. "I need time to think. To figure things out." "I understand," he replied quietly. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." I hung up the phone, the weight of his words lingering in the air. I didn't know what would happen next, or if this was just another empty promise. But for the first time in days, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe things could change. Maybe we could change. It's been a few weeks since that phone call, and I've spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that's happened. Ryan and I have talked a lot since then, but there are still so many unanswered questions between us. I won't pretend that it's easy, nothing about this process has been easy. But something in me has shifted, and I feel like I'm finally starting to see things more clearly. I've spent time on my own, rediscovering who I am outside of the roles I had been playing for so long. I've gone back to things I loved doing before everything became about us: writing, reading, even just sitting quietly by myself. I've realized that I had been so consumed with trying to hold on to a relationship that I lost myself in the process. It's not an easy truth to accept, but it's one that has been freeing in a way I didn't expect. Ryan has been patient, giving me the space I needed while still showing up when I asked. There are no grand gestures, no sweeping romantic apologies. Instead, it's been small, everyday things that have slowly started to rebuild our trust. I'm not saying we're fixed, we're far from it. But I've come to realize that maybe this is what healing looks like. It's messy, it's imperfect, but it's real. We had dinner the other night. It was the first time in weeks that we sat down together like we used to. There was no tension, no pressure. Just the quiet hum of conversation and the occasional laughter. It felt strange at first, like stepping into an old pair of shoes, but as the evening wore on, it felt more natural. "I've been thinking a lot," Ryan said, his voice softer than usual. "About how I've been holding on to everything, my work, my routine, even my pride. I've been afraid to let go, afraid of what might happen if I did." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in so long, and I saw the exhaustion in his eyes. It wasn't just from work or the endless obligations. It was from the weight of our relationship, of everything we had both been avoiding. And for the first time, I didn't feel resentful. I felt understanding. "I think I was afraid of letting go too," I said quietly. "I didn't know who I was without you, without us. I was so scared that if we weren't together, I'd lose myself completely." Ryan nodded, taking a deep breath. "I never wanted you to feel like that. I'm sorry for making you feel that way." I felt a small knot in my stomach unravel at his words. They weren't magic, and they didn't fix everything, but they were a start. A real start. I didn't need grand apologies anymore. I needed honesty. And this was honest. We've taken it slow, day by day, figuring out how to communicate better, how to be better. We've started talking more openly about what we both need and want, not just from each other, but from ourselves. We've started being more present, more mindful of each other's feelings. I'm not going to lie and say it's perfect. It's not. But I've learned that perfection isn't the goal. The goal is to grow. To understand. To move forward, even when it feels scary. For the first time in a long while, I'm not afraid of what's next. I'm not afraid of being alone, and I'm not afraid of being with Ryan. I'm ready for whatever comes, because I know that no matter what, I'm not the same person I was when I first said those words to him. I've found a piece of myself again, and that's something I'll never lose. In the end, it wasn't the end of us. It was the beginning of something new, something real. And this time, I'm not holding myself back. Neither is he.